What's up, YouTube? Aaron here with a Magic Core Set 2020 Omniscience Draft Guide. I've been playing this format a lot. I have a pretty good win record with it, and I wanted to just do a quick video to explain some cards I pick, why I pick them, and then hopefully you guys can take this information and go play this format and get a whole bunch of wins, because this format is a blast. It's a great way to fill out your collection, and it's also a great way to grind out vault progress and wild cards. But I mean, honestly, it's just the format's a blast. It's a ton of fun to play. Before I dive in, if you guys could just take a second and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything, helps me out a ton, and that way you'll know anytime I post more stuff that maybe can help you with some arena stuff that you're doing. So let's dive right in. So I have this divided up into a couple different categories here. I have bomb cards that you just definitely need to take every time. I have draw spells. I have, A-tier creatures, combo enablers, some protection stuff, and just other cards that I like that might not be too on the nose that you would think to draft them. So starting in the very beginning, we have, and I just accidentally removed that guy, which we don't want to do because that guy's great. I have cards that are definitely pack one, pick one stuff. So Spectral Sailor, anything in this format that draws you a card is exactly where you want to be. And the reason behind that is the same reason that you want to stick to a 40 card or a 60 card build limit in normal Magic, that you want as much of a chance to get to your bomb game ending stuff as possible. And in a format where everything costs 0, anything that draws you a card just reduces the number of cards in your deck, which lets you draw that much closer to your game-winning combo, or just playing a whole bunch of big creatures. So Spectral Sailor is fantastic. The fact that it lets you draw 2 cards per turn cycle, because you get the 5 mana on your turn and your opponent's turn, means that when you play this guy, you get to draw a card immediately, and then you get to draw a card in your opponent's turn, and then you get to draw a card in your turn again, and the card advantage is real with that guy. The only kind of downside to him is that he's a creature, so he's vulnerable to a lot of creature-based removal, but overall this guy is fantastic, and I don't mind first picking him almost ever. Drawn from Dreams, same thing. This draws us 2 cards, but it's 2 cards from the top 7, so we get to look at the top 7 and pick the best 2 cards, and they go right into our hand. This card's kind of great as a combo enabler. It lets you find the multiple pieces that you need to find a combo off, and we'll get into that more later, but finding stuff like a Scholar of the Ages and an Unsummon, or a Scholar of the Ages and, literally any other instant or sorcery. It's just really good. This card is definitely a premium card. Next up is Cavalier of Gales. This card is great. So it's a pretty big body. 5/5 flyer is no joke. And when it enters the battlefield, you brainstorm. So you get to look at the top 3 cards and then put 2 back from your hand on top of your library. So it nets you 1 card, but it's card selection. So you get to draw 3 and then put any 2 cards from your hand back. So if you're sitting on some duds, it lets you recycle those pretty easy, and it's a really reasonable clock as well. Cavalier of Flame, the red one in the cycle, is also really good. 6/5 that is almost always going to have haste and pump your team up when it comes into play. There's not a lot of cards that have haste in this format that matter. And this is a great way, if you draw your entire deck or draw a bunch of cards, play a bunch of creatures, this is a great way to then give them all haste and attack and try to win the same turn in which you're comboing off. And combo is really what I like doing in this format. Shared Summons is another insane card. It lets you search your library for 2 different creature cards and just reveal them and put them in your hand. But in a format where you don't have to pay for anything, it's basically just Tooth and Nail, where you just get to grab 2 creatures and put them straight into play. This ends the game on the spot sometimes. You can find double Yurok Wave Crasher, you can find Wave Crasher plus Corpse Knight, Wave Crasher plus Sageroy Denizen. I mean, there's just a lot of ways that this can end the game. Card's really good. So this one is really close to not being a first pick, just because believe it or not, it is a little slow. But the fact that it's a 4/5 flying body and then lets you draw 2 cards and then discard a card is really good for churning through your deck and trying to find combo pieces. There are other cards that will take over this one, but I mean, this is a pretty solid card in general, and I'm always happy to see it in the pack. Gargos is another great one. So 8/7 is no joke. Vigilance is a super important ability. It lets you attack in and then still have him back on defense if you need it. But the important part is that when he or another creature becomes a target of a spell, he fights another creature. Part of our goal is to draft just as many Angelic Gifts and Blade Brands and befuddles as we can. So it basically turns all those spells into draw card plus removal. So Gargos is pretty good, and he's something that I definitely snap up when I can. Agent of Treachery is really good. So Mr. Steal Your Girl comes in and takes literally any permanent on the board. It's as strong as it seems. When you combine him with cards like Unsummon or Portal of Sanctuary and get to just rebuy him over and over again, it just gets really out of control really fast. Scholar of the Ages is probably the second best card you can draft in this set. And I'm not doing these in any pick order. I'm just kind of going down the list of how I roughly have these sorted. But Scholar of the Ages is insane. There are so many ways you can just win the game on the spot with this guy. So Scholar of the Ages plus Anticipate plus Unsummon. So let me back up a little bit. So the core is Scholar of the Ages plus Unsummon or plus Captivating Gyre. Either one of those will let you infinitely bounce Scholar of the Ages because you cast Scholar of the Ages, you unsummon her, you cast her again and getting back the unsummon, and you can just repeat that ad nauseum. Where it starts getting really nutty is when you add in literally any other instant or sorcery. So Scholar of the Ages plus Unsummon plus Anticipate lets you draw your entire deck. Actually, plus any draw spell that is instant or sorcery speed lets you draw your whole deck. Scholar of the Ages plus Unsummon plus Active Treason lets you steal all of your opponent's creatures and give all of your creatures haste. Scholar of the Ages plus Unsummon plus Sage's Row Denizen lets you mill out your opponent in one turn. Pretty much all the stupid broken combos you can do revolve around this card and a way to bounce her back to your hand. If you don't have an Unsummon, you could also use Blood for Bones. Because this doesn't target, you get to sacrifice Scholar to Blood for Bones and then return Scholar to hand or to play. So this kind of lets you loop her ETB ability over and over again as well. All in all, this card is great. It is definitely the second best card in the set. If you get any, there's only one card I would take over at pack one, pick one, and I think it's pretty close, to be honest. Let's actually get to that card. Vilas, this is, I think, the best card in the set. So an 8/8 flyer is no joke just to begin with. The fact that you can pay a black mana, which remember, you get a black mana on your turn and your opponent's turn, to either shrink or kill one of your opponent's creatures plus draw 2 cards, means that every cycle this is drawing you 4 cards and you're killing or weakening something, making combat a lot harder. Combined with the fact that it's a very reasonable clock on its own makes this guy, in my opinion, the best card in the set. Barely beating out Scholar of the Ages. And then the last really first pick card is this big old rare dragon. So 7/7 flyer, no joke, and then the fact that it kills 3 things every time you attack with it or just domes your opponent in the face easily makes this guy a first pick. So these are all first picks. These are things that I will gladly take anytime I can. And if you disagree with me or you think there's some stuff I missed out on this list, by all means, comment below so we can have a discussion about it. I'm really interested to hear what other people think about this because, again, this is just my opinions, but I think I'm right, obviously. All right, so let's go into draw spells here. So Bag of Holding's a rare. You're not going to see it too often. It is a little mana intensive because it costs 2 to activate the ability, but the upside is that later on you can sacrifice it and then just get all those cards back. Usually games don't go too long, so this guy isn't super premium on my list, but it does say draw card, so it's probably worth taking. Angelic Gift is great. It's a common. If you're actively trying to draft these guys, you'll get a bunch of them. The other thing to note is that these drafts are all against bots, and bots don't value stuff like Angelic Gift very high. So the chances of you wheeling this and getting this anywhere from 12th to 15th pick is pretty high. All in all, though, it says draw a card. It makes one of your creatures flying. It's great. You can also cast it on your opponent's creatures if you don't have a creature, but that's not the best use of the card, but it is an option. Anticipate, also a common, also a card you can end up with 4 or more of. It lets you select a card from the top 3, helps you find your combo. A great card. Blade Brand is very similar to Angelic Gift, but it's just not an enchantment. Again, you can cast it on any creature. It just helps cycle through your deck. Season of Growth is pretty cool. So because of the Blade Brands and Angelic Gifts we have, Season of Growth a lot of times just becomes draw a card. The upside of being able to scry every time a creature enters the battlefield is also pretty huge. So creature enters the battlefield, you scry whatever it is to the top or the bottom, and then you cast Angelic Gift on it, and then draw that card, and then draw a card from Angelic Gift. This is a card that definitely helps you churn through your library, and it's something you should definitely not overlook, even though I guess at face value it doesn't look all that great. But you should be ending up with a bunch of Blade Brands and Angelic Gifts anyway, which just makes this card better. Cloud Conceer is a creature that draws you a card, and that's really all we need to say about that guy. Risen Reef is also a creature that draws you a card, but he also has the upside of every elemental you play after that also draws you a card. There's a bunch of elementals that are worth playing in this format, Cloud Conceer being one of them, but Vorse Claw is a 7/7 vanilla creature that makes its way into most decks. Yarok's Wavecratcher is an elemental. There's just a lot of random stuff that's elemental that will end up drawing you cards, so this guy is honestly pretty solid. Befuddle is just another instant spell that says draw card. Its ability is not super relevant. You can use it as a combat trick, which is fine, but most of the time you're just going to cycle this pretty much immediately to try to draw more cards. Winged Words is one of the best draw spells in the format. It's literally just draw 2 cards, and it helps you just, again, dig to your combos. So Bone to Ash, I was thinking about putting under the protection column, but honestly it says draw a card on it, so yeah, we're going to put it in the draw spells column. Bone to Ash is great. So this format is won by creatures, or like pretty much all the combos have to do with creatures entering the battlefield. So a way to counter a Vilas or a Scholar of the Ages or a Gargos or pretty much anything, and the fact that you get to draw a card is absolutely nuts, and there are no amount of this card that I won't play. Diviner's Lockbox is kind of a little bit more situational. So this card is good in decks that are playing multiples of the same card. So if you end up with like 5 or 6 Anticipates, having this card and just naming Anticipate all the time eventually will let you draw 3 cards, which is awesome. Where this card gets even better is when you have something like Season of Growth, and you get to cast a creature and scry to the top. You know what's on top, and then you activate Lockbox, and then magically you know what's on top, so you draw 3 cards. It's also good with Manifold Key, which you can activate the lockbox, name whatever you want. If you miss, you then know what's on top. You untap your lockbox and then try it again, and you end up drawing 3 cards. And then the last one I have on this list is Moldavine Reclamation. This is just a really cool card. Anytime a creature you control dies, you get to gain a life and draw a card. It benefits you trading or chump blocking or just attacking in and not really worrying about your creatures dying because you're just going to get to replace them anyway. Card is pretty good, and I like it in certain builds. I'm more than likely always going to take it, but it really shines in some builds with others. So we have our bombs, we have our draw spells. So the third column I have here, these are all what I would consider to be tier B creatures. So there's stuff that's definitely not first pickable if there is a draw spell or a bomb in the pack, but they're cards that I'm never sad to take. So Fairy Miscreant is very high ceiling, low floor. If you only get 1 or 2 of them, they're not that great. At this point, it's just a 1/1 for 1. It is a blue creature, which combos with Sage's Roar Denizen, so at the very least you have that, and at the very least you can chump. But this guy really shines when you get between 3 and 5 of them, and it just becomes draw a card, put a creature on the board. Audacious Thief says draw a card. You're not really worried about the life loss that much. The only problem with this guy is because he's only a 2/2, he gets outclassed really quickly, and he usually just becomes an attack 1 time, draw 1 card kind of deal. He's really good with Manifold Key. The other end of Manifold Key lets you make a creature unblockable, so making him unblockable and attacking over and over again, drawing cards is pretty good, but more often than not, he's just suspend 1 draw card. Ironroot Warlord is pretty solid. You're playing a lot of creatures in this deck because everything's free, and you get 5 mana a turn to play with, so he's a good way to utilize that mana to make more little 1/1 white soldier tokens, either to chump block or to just amass a ton of them so that you can cast any one of the overrun spells and just kill your opponent with it. But overall, he's pretty good. He actually works really good with Moldavine Reclamation, which is something we already showed here, because he turns out a bunch of little creatures that you can chump block with or just attack into your opponent's creatures, and they end up drawing you cards, so it's pretty solid. Gravedigger's a pretty good card. He, at face value, just lets you rebuy any of your other creatures. So if somebody kills your Cloud Conceer or your Risen Reef or, kills your Vilas, you just get to bring it back and recast it, and everything's fantastic. Elden Raid is also pretty good. He does say draw a card on him, but he has the downside of having to discard a card to do so. There are a lot of cards that you'll end up wanting to discard because this is a format where you don't play any basic lands in your deck whatsoever, or any lands in general. You usually end up with some junky cards that you don't really care about discarding, so he cycles those into other cards. Always happy to draft him, but not as high as some of the other cards, and definitely not as high as a spell that just straight up draws you a card. Silverback Shaman's pretty good. He's a 5/4 with Trample, which, you know, is a pretty quick clock, no joke on his own. And then when he dies, when he dies, he replaces himself. So that's pretty solid as well. Yarok is awesome. I love this card. It's a pet card of mine. I actually play this in Standard pretty often. He's really good, and the fact that he doubles all your triggered, or not doubles, he adds 1 to all your triggered abilities from ETB effects. Is pretty solid, especially when you're playing stuff like Sage's Row Denizen. He just makes you mill out your opponent that much faster. Safara's pretty good. She's just kind of vanilla. She's a 7/7 flyer, and that's really all she does. Making your other creatures with flying indestructible is rarely relevant, and she dies to just a lot of stuff, and she's fine. I mean, I'm never going to be upset to have her in play. I'm never going to be upset to draw her. But she's not as insane as the other two triple pip creatures, which we have over in the bomb slot over here, Vilas and Drakaseth. Dragon Mage is the next one, and this is another card that has a very high ceiling, low floor. So if you get to hit your opponent with this, and you're the one that gets to play your 7 cards first, this card can be very, very powerful. I like to combo this with Rule of Law. So Rule of Law says each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. And in this format, that seems like something you really wouldn't want to play. And I only really play it with Dragon Mage, but the cool thing is that if you hit your opponent with Dragon Mage, you then get to play out your entire hand, cast all your draw spells, play all your creatures. And then if you play Rule of Law as your last spell, it means your opponent is now stuck with 8 cards in their hand and they can only cast 1. So again, really, really high upside on this card. If you have a combo kill in your deck, like if you're playing Scholar of the Ages plus Unsummon plus, you know, some other random stuff, this guy's great. And he usually makes the cut anyway, but you just got to be careful because it is symmetrical and you are potentially giving your opponent the win if you can't win the turn you connect with him. Howling Giant is probably the best of the big creatures that aren't like pack 1, pick 1 bombs. He puts 9 power on the board. It's spread out between 3 creatures. He has reach. All in all, just a very, very solid creature. All right, so the next row is all combo enablers. So Unsummon, we've talked about this a bunch. This lets us return our Scholar of the Ages or our Agent of Treachery to our hands. It also enables Gargos. There's a lot of different things that it can do, but this is at its best when you're pointing it at Scholar of the Ages and then comboing off. And that says the same for Captivating Gyre. It's at its best with Scholar of the Ages, but you can use it to combo with stuff like Sage's Row Denizen to mill out your opponent. Manifold Key we've already talked about a couple times, so we'll skip that. Corpse Knight is really cool. So there is a card called Yarok's Wavecrasher, which we're going to just look at real quick here. And this says when it enters the battlefield, you return another creature you control to its owner's hand. So if you get 2 of these guys in play, and either a Sage's Row Denizen or a Corpse Knight, you do get to just end the game. Corpse Knight or Denizen in play, and a Wavecrasher, you cast your second Wavecrasher, bouncing the first one, then you recast the first one, bouncing the second one, and you just do it over and over and over again. And with Corpse Knight, you just make them lose 20 life. With Sage's Row Denizen, you mill out their entire library. But those are both just literal win-on-the-spot combos if your opponent doesn't have removal or a counter spell to deal with it. Rule of Law we've already talked about. I only play it in the Dragon Mage deck. That's really the only place I think it's good. Portal of Sanctuary is kind of cool because it returns not only a creature you control and each aura to your hand. It gives you a little bit more rebuy with stuff like Angelic Gift, with Wolfkin Bond. It lets you rebuy any of your Enter the Battlefield ability creatures. It lets you give your creatures pseudo vigilance. So if you're attacking with your Howling Giant and your opponent has some creatures that you want to be able to block as well, you can attack with him and then bounce him back to your hand, recast him. And then, I mean, with Howling Giant, you would also get the ability of putting 2 wolves into play. But all in all, this card's great. It's a good combo enabler. Chandra I like a lot, but I really only like her for her -2 ability. Creating elemental tokens is whatever. Usually your opponent's going to have stuff to block 1/1s. But the -2 to recast like an Anticipate or to recast, you know, a Befuddle or a Winged Words or whatever is pretty solid, and that's the reason I have her over here in the enabler pile. Wave Crasher we've talked about. It's an elemental for Risen Reef, and it's one of the key cards you need if you're trying just to win the game on the spot after drawing a bunch of cards. Blood for Bones we've also talked about a little bit. It's just another way to rebuy Scholar of the Ages. Because it doesn't target, you can get back the creature that you sacrifice directly to the battlefield and something else to your hand. So this is just a great way to regrow any creatures from your graveyard. Repeated Reverberation basically lets you copy any spell twice that you cast after it. So casting Repeated Reverberation and then casting Anticipate gives you 3 Anticipates. Same thing with Winged Words or any other of those cards. It's pretty sweet as a combo card, and it's definitely something you're going to want to take. And then Captivating Gyre, we've talked about already. It's really good to bounce your Scholar of the Ages. It's also good if you have multiple blue creatures in play to be able to bounce so that you can recast them to activate Sage's Door into Denizen, or you can bounce all your opponent's creatures to attack for the win, or you can bounce all your creatures with Enter the Battlefield abilities like Howling Giant. Next column here is all protection. Duress is okay. It's probably the worst of the hand disruption spells, but it's still something I don't mind having one of in the deck. Yarok's Fenlurker is also not that great, but it does have the ability of stealing a card from your opponent's hand. And because this format is a format where you start off with 3 cards, neutering a card out of their hand is pretty good. It's also just, a 2/2. Not great. Negate is really solid. That's a card that I like playing at least 2 of in a deck. It stops a lot of the combo stuff. It stops a lot of removal. It's just a solid all-around counterspell. Mind Rot is fantastic, and it's a card I like having at least 2 of. If you are on the play and you get to Mind Rot your opponent, it is so backbreaking. It's also great to draw into these later in the game. Like if you hit them with a Dragon Mage, they draw 7, you draw 7, and you have some amount of Mind Rots. You get to Mind Rot their hand away, and all of a sudden your draw 7 was one-sided. Planar Cleansing is the only real piece of removal I added on my list of cards to talk about. The removal in general it's fine. A lot of the creatures are so big that it just doesn't even matter, but Planar Cleansing is a great reset button. If you are on the draw and you have this in your hand, your opponent turn 1 dumps their whole hand and then you just clear the board. It's pretty hard to recover from that, so this is definitely something you're going to want to consider. Thought Distortion, in my opinion, is the best of the hand disruption spells, and the reason being is that when you are trying to disrupt your opponent's hand, especially if you're playing a combo deck, which is the whole point of what we're talking about here, this gets rid of all the negates, it gets rid of all of the what card am I thinking of? Bone Ash. Gets rid of any way they have of dealing with it, and this spell is also uncounterable. It's also great if you hit your opponent with a Dragon Mage and then hit Thought Distortion, it could wipe out half their hand. So it's definitely a card you're going to want to take, and probably want to take higher than Mind Rot. And then lastly, I just have a couple cards that I think are worth talking about that don't seem really great, but that in general I like. Active Treason is one of them. My favorite mode on Active Treason is actually targeting your own creatures. So if your opening hand is something like Dragon's Mage and Active Treason, you can cast Dragon Mage, Active Treason your own Dragon Mage to give him haste, and then attack, draw 7, and go from there. Same goes for any of the other creatures. It's also a combo with Scholar of the Ages. So if you have Scholar of the Ages plus Unsummon plus Active Treason, you get to gain control of every creature on the board and give every creature on the board haste. And then if you have any kind of draw spell, you also get to draw your deck and then give all your creatures haste and win on the spot. Natural End is a card I really like having at least one of in the deck. There are artifacts and enchantments you have to worry about, Rule of Law being one of them, Season of Growth. There's a bunch of stuff that's annoying, and this just gives you a good, clean answer to deal with it. It's also a way to incidentally gain a little bit of life. A lot of times it makes combat math really hard if your opponent attacks thinking they have the win, and then you just destroy an artifact or enchantment, stabilize, and then kill them on the crackback. And then lastly, Pulsa Marasa. This is just another good way to get your bombs back. It's not a great card, but it's definitely something that's worth playing. This 6 life is also no joke. It makes combat pretty hard, but it's just regrow a creature, gain 6 life. So those are my thoughts on how to draft Core Set 2020 Omniscience. And I'd love to hear your comments if you guys agree or disagree with any of my picks, if you think I missed anything obvious. Now, I did skip a lot of the more vanilla stuff, like you don't see Vorse Claw in here, you don't see Ripscale Predator. I tried to stick to just cards that I really enjoy drafting, or cards that I think are probably undervalued just because they don't really look that good. But either way, let me know in the comments what you guys think. And again, if you can just hit that subscribe button, helps me out a lot. I really appreciate it. And it lets me know that you guys want more content like this, and I have no problem continuing on providing more stuff like this if it's something that people want. So ideally, I'll have a couple drafts up at some point in the next couple days so you can see my kind of pick order in action. But I hope this helps out any drafts you guys do, and good luck. May you always open up with Scholar of the Ages, Unsummon, and Anticipate, and kill your opponents on turn 1. So hope everybody has a great day. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next time.